Do not open that door. The warning appeared across Caleb Morgan's wall terminal at 1:13 in the morning, exactly 3 seconds after someone knocked. 3 soft taps. Then silence. Caleb stopped tightening the relay inside his heater and listened to rain hammer the metal roof of his Northpoint Colony home. The weather display showed 36 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind from the northern ridge pushed sheets of water across the street, turning blue security lights into trembling reflections on black pavement. Nobody should have been outside. Someone knocked again. Caleb wiped his hands on his utility shirt and opened the exterior camera. A woman stood beneath the narrow awning. Alien. Unmistakably. Her skin was cobalt blue, darkened by rain. Silver-white hair clung to her face and soaked frontier coat. Her violet eyes were larger than human eyes, with 2 concentric rings inside each iris and almost no visible white. Her nose bridge was short and flat. Her cheekbones extended toward narrow sensory slits where human ears would have been. Long fingers with additional joints held the coat closed against her body. Most striking were the turquoise structures beneath the skin along her temples and upper cheeks. They pulsed with rapid light. The terminal chimed. Predatory response pattern. High probability. Threat index. 91%. Caleb stared at the number. The woman stared at the closed door. He activated the intercom. Can you hear me? Her head lifted. Yes. Her voice was quiet. Controlled. Tired. Name. Alara Venn. Caleb Morgan. He glanced at the warning. Are you dangerous? Alara looked toward the camera. For a moment, rain was the only sound between them. Not intentionally. Caleb almost laughed. That is not exactly reassuring. Your machine has already decided. Machines do that. Humans usually listen. Caleb looked down the street. Every neighboring door was sealed. Warm windows glowed behind rain-streaked glass. Did you try the shelter? He asked. 2. Both refused you. The scanners produced the same classification. The turquoise structures along her face flashed faster. Caleb watched the threat index rise to 93%. Alara wrapped her arms tighter around herself. I will leave, she said. Where? Somewhere your neighbors do not have to be afraid. Caleb looked at the temperature display again. 36 degrees. Then at her soaked clothing. Wait. He reached for the door control. The terminal immediately sounded a sharper warning. Entry authorization not recommended. Caleb pressed the release anyway. The exterior seal opened with a mechanical hiss. Cold air rushed across the floor, carrying rain and the metallic smell of the colony into his warm house. Alara stepped backward. Your system told you not to do that. My system also thinks my heater is functioning correctly. Behind him, the heater clicked twice in protest. Alara looked past Caleb toward it. Not toward the kitchen. Not toward anything valuable. Toward the vent pushing warm air into the room. Caleb stepped aside. Come inside. You do not know what I am. No. You do not know whether the scanner is wrong. Also no. Her violet eyes narrowed. Then why? Caleb looked at the water running from her hair and the tremor in her strange blue hands. Because whatever else you are cold. Alara crossed the threshold. The scanner turned red. 94%. 95. Caleb closed the door. Warm air surrounded her. The turquoise structures continued flashing for several seconds, then slowly began to settle. 91%. 83. 74. Alara never saw the numbers. She was still staring at the heater as if warmth itself were something she no longer expected anyone to share. Caleb watched the threat index fall and said nothing. The colony's machine had called her a monster with 95% confidence. Yet the first thing she did inside his home was stand perfectly still and try not to drip on the floor. Alara remained 5 feet from the door. Caleb noticed because she had positioned herself with almost mathematical precision, close enough to reach the emergency release in 2 steps, but far enough inside that the rain no longer touched her. Water gathered beneath her boots. The turquoise structures along her temples still pulsed, though slower now. Caleb took a towel from the utility cabinet and approached. Alara stiffened. He stopped immediately. Towel. I recognize it. Good start. Caleb placed it on a chair and backed away. Only then did she take it. He found a thermal blanket next and left that on the same chair. Alara watched him as if every object required an explanation. What is the exchange? She asked. There is no exchange. You opened your home. You are providing heat, fabric, shelter, and soon soup. assuming you do not object to vegetables. Her violet eyes narrowed. Resources have value. So does not freezing. Caleb walked into the kitchen and heated a bowl of soup. Steam curled beneath the overhead light as he placed it on the table. Alara did not move. You can eat. What do you expect afterward? Probably dishes. She stared at him. Caleb sighed. That was a joke. Human humor appears poorly timed. That is most of its charm. He returned to the heater and deliberately turned his back. Behind him, silence lasted almost a minute. Then a chair moved. A spoon touched ceramic. Caleb kept working. The heater clicked twice, shuddered, and pushed another wave of warm air through the room. He checked the thermostat. 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Too low for someone who had been standing soaked at 36. Caleb raised it to 74. The wall scanner remained active. Threat index, 63%. He glanced toward Alara. The turquoise structures were slowing. Several minutes later, the display changed again. 48%. Caleb said nothing. When Alara finished eating, she cleaned the bowl without being asked and returned to her position near the door. There is a spare bedroom, Caleb said. The bed is clean. This location is sufficient. That location is a floor. Yes. Humans improved on floors a long time ago. Alara looked toward the emergency release. Caleb followed her gaze. You want to stay close to the exit. I do not know you. Fair. And you do not know me. Also fair. Her fingers tightened around the thermal blanket. If you change your decision while I sleep, I would prefer to leave before you have to tell me twice. Caleb looked at the door controls. The automatic night lock indicator was glowing blue. He crossed the room and disabled it. The light turned white. Manual release available from both sides. Alara stared at the display. You removed the lock. Yes. Why? Caleb returned to his workbench. Because shelter stops being shelter if you cannot leave. She seemed to have no answer for that. Hours later, the rain softened to a whisper. Caleb woke when the heater cycled and stepped quietly into the main room. Alara was asleep beneath the thermal blanket on the floor, exactly 5 feet from the exit. One long blue hand rested near the manual release. The scanner showed 38%. Caleb looked at the thermostat. 74 degrees. He increased it to 76, then watched the turquoise lights along Alara's temples slow another fraction. She never woke. Caleb stood there for a moment, listening to the heater and the rain. Whatever the colony's scanner believed it was measuring, the woman sleeping beside his door did not look dangerous. She looked like someone who had learned never to sleep farther from freedom than she could run. Morning reached Northpoint Colony as a pale gray glow behind rain-streaked windows. Caleb found Alara awake beside the heater, the thermal blanket folded neatly on the chair, and the floor near the door already dry. She was listening to the wall unit with her head tilted slightly, silver-white hair falling behind one narrow sensory slit. You are judging my heater, Caleb said. Alara looked at him. It is producing a resonance pulse every 21 seconds. Caleb started the coffee unit. Most guests wait until breakfast before insulting the appliances. I am not insulting it. The heater clicked, vibrated softly, then settled. Alara pointed toward it. That. Caleb paused. He had heard the sound for weeks. You know what causes it? Possibly. That is already better than my answer. He handed her a diagnostic meter and opened the service panel. Alara crouched beside the unit. Her long, extra-jointed fingers moved easily between narrow components that Caleb normally reached with specialized tools. She listened through another heating cycle, checked 2 voltage readings, then touched the mounting bracket beneath the thermal controller. Your relay is functional. Diagnostics say it is degrading. Your diagnostics are measuring the symptom. She loosened the bracket, inserted a thin insulating spacer from Caleb's parched tray, and tightened it again. The heater started. No vibration. No clicking. Only warm air. Caleb stared at the display. Stable. How long did you say you were planning to stay? Alara handed back the meter. I did not. We should negotiate. The turquoise structures along her temples brightened slightly, though Caleb could not tell whether that meant amusement. What did you do before Northpoint? He asked. Environmental systems, engineering. That explains a lot. It explains one heater. Before Caleb could answer, the exterior chime sounded. A delivery worker stood beneath the awning holding an atmospheric filter Caleb had ordered earlier that week. Caleb opened the door halfway. Morning, Ben. Ben handed him the package, then noticed Alara behind him. His expression changed. That is her. Caleb glanced back. Alara had stopped near the heater. Her name is Alara. Ben raised his wrist scanner. Colony notice says predatory response pattern. The scanner chirped. Threat index, 47%. Alara's shoulders tightened. The turquoise structures along her temples began pulsing faster. 54%. See, Ben said. It is rising. Caleb looked from the scanner to Alara. She had not stepped forward. Her hands remained close to her body. Her violet eyes were fixed on the open doorway, and Caleb recognized the same calculation from last night. Distance. Exit. Escape. 62%. She is standing 12 feet away, Caleb said. Doing what exactly? The scanner says she is escalating. The scanner says a number is escalating. Ben frowned. Same difference. Caleb looked at Alara's flashing facial structures. Maybe not. He took the filter and closed the door. Ben remained outside for a moment, then walked away through the drizzle. Inside, Alara exhaled slowly. Her temple lights began to settle. Caleb checked the wall scanner. 58%. 51. 43. Interesting, he murmured. What? Every time you become uncomfortable, that number climbs. Alara looked at the display. Perhaps discomfort makes me dangerous. Caleb shook his head. Or perhaps the machine does not know the difference. The heater pushed warm air through the room. The turquoise structures slowed further. 39%. Caleb watched the number fall. Last night he had assumed the scanner was measuring something hidden inside Alara. Now he wondered whether it was measuring something happening to her instead. The colony saw a warning whenever those strange lights accelerated. Caleb saw a woman standing perfectly still, trying very hard not to give anyone another reason to close a door. By early afternoon, the rain had faded to a thin mist, leaving Northpoint Colony covered in silver reflections. Caleb sat at the kitchen table reviewing maintenance schedules while Alara stood at the counter with a ceramic mug of tea. She had rejected coffee after one sip and described it as unnecessarily hostile. Caleb had decided that was probably fair. The heater ran quietly now, its resonance problem gone. Alara lifted the mug with both hands. Her long, extra-jointed fingers tried to fit around the narrow human handle. She adjusted once, then twice. The mug slipped. Ceramic struck the floor and shattered. Alara stepped backward so quickly that Caleb looked up before the last fragment stopped moving. The turquoise structures along her temples flashed bright. I am sorry. Caleb pushed his chair back. Stay there. Her violet eyes widened. I understand. There are pieces near your feet. He reached for the broom. Alara moved toward the exterior door anyway. I will compensate you. Caleb began sweeping. For a mug. For the property I damaged. I have more. That does not remove the loss. Her voice had become formal, almost rehearsed. I have no local credits, but the heater repair has measurable value. You may calculate the difference. Caleb stopped sweeping and looked at her. She was not watching the broken mug. She was watching the door. Why are you preparing to leave? I damaged something in your home. Yes. The second shelter removed me after I caused a food dispenser to enter service mode. Caleb frowned. How? Alara raised one hand. Its interface required a human grip. My fingers activated two controls at once. So you pressed the wrong buttons. They said I interfered with colony equipment. Caleb looked at her unusual hand, then at the narrow handle on the broken ceramic. Suddenly the problem seemed embarrassingly obvious. Northpoint had built everything around human bodies and then treated Alara as the malfunction when she did not fit. Caleb swept the final fragment into the dustpan. Alara. She looked at him. It was a mug. I broke it. And civilization continues. Her expression remained uncertain. Caleb opened the cabinet. 5 identical mugs stared back at him. All narrow handles. All designed for hands like his. He searched a lower storage compartment and found an insulated maintenance cup he used during winter service calls. Wide rubberized body. No handle. He placed it on the table. Try this. Alara approached slowly. She wrapped her fingers around it. No adjustment. No awkward angle. It simply fit. Better? Caleb asked. Yes. Good. It is yours. Her eyes lifted. Mine. That is usually what those words mean. But I damaged the other one. Then consider this an aggressive attempt to protect the remaining 5. The turquoise structures along her temples began slowing. Caleb poured fresh tea into the insulated cup and returned to his service tablet. He expected Alara to move back toward the door. She did not. After several seconds, she sat across from him at the kitchen table. The wall scanner still displayed 39%, but Caleb barely noticed it anymore. Outside, workers crossed wet walkways beneath gray afternoon light. Inside, nothing dramatic had happened. No great promise had been made. No one had apologized for the colony. A ceramic mug had broken, and Caleb had found another cup. But Alara held that cup between her strange blue hands, as if he had given her something much larger. For years, every difference in her body had apparently been treated as a problem she was responsible for solving. Caleb had done something simpler. He changed the object instead of asking her to change herself. By late afternoon, Caleb's maintenance schedule had started disappearing one job at a time. The first cancellation came from Habitat 12. Then a water recycler inspection vanished from tomorrow morning. 10 minutes later, a family whose atmospheric system Caleb had serviced for 6 years sent a brief message saying they had chosen another technician. Caleb stared at the terminal. Efficient, Alara said from across the kitchen. She sat at the table with the insulated cup between her cobalt blue hands, the first object in his house that seemed designed for her, instead of merely tolerated by her. What is? Fear. Another notification appeared. Service contract canceled by client. Caleb closed it. Northpoint has always been good at paperwork. Alara did not smile. Her violet eyes moved toward his account summary. Your projected income has fallen. You are becoming alarmingly familiar with my finances. You left the display open. That does not make it less alarming. The turquoise structures along her temples pulsed faster. This is because I am here. Caleb leaned back. This is because people are making decisions about someone they have never spoken to. The result is the same. Not to me. Alara lowered her gaze. Another cancellation arrived. She stood without answering and disappeared into the spare room. Caleb returned to rebuilding a circulation pump. 20 minutes later, the exterior control chimed. He looked up. Alara stood beside the door, wearing her frontier coat. The thermal blanket was folded neatly on the chair. Her insulated cup sat on the kitchen table. Caleb looked from the cup to her. Leaving? Yes. Where? The freight terminal has covered loading platforms. Caleb checked the weather display. 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Rain expected within 15 minutes. That sounds luxurious. It is adequate. You use that word whenever something is terrible. Alara reached toward the manual release. Caleb did not move between her and the door. Your kindness has become expensive, she said. You opened your home for one cold stranger. You did not agree to lose your work. Caleb crossed to the table, picked up the insulated cup, and held it toward her. You forgot this. Alara stared at it. I left it intentionally. Why? It belongs here. Correct. Caleb, what? I do not belong here. Rain began ticking against the windows. Softly at first, then harder. Caleb looked at the cup in his hand. This is still yours. That does not answer me. Maybe not. He placed the cup beside her folded blanket. But I am not going to decide whether you stay. Alara's eyes narrowed. Your contracts are disappearing. My contracts are mine to worry about. Because of me. Because people are afraid. You cannot separate the two. Caleb looked toward the rain streaming down the glass. I can separate you from choices other people make about you. Silence filled the room. Alara's hand remained near the door control. Why would you pay this price? She asked. Caleb glanced at the circulation pump on his workbench. Because if my door only stays open when the neighbors approve of who is inside, then it was never really my door. Alara stared at him. Caleb returned to the pump and slid a tray of tools toward the empty chair beside him. Besides, you already insulted my heater. You might as well criticize the rest of my equipment. Your circulation pump is badly aligned. Caleb looked at her. You have not even examined it. I can hear it. He sighed. This arrangement is becoming difficult. The turquoise lights along her temples slowed. Alara looked once at the rain, then at the manual release. Finally, she removed her coat. She picked up the insulated cup and returned it to the kitchen table. Then she sat beside Caleb, farther from the exterior door than she had ever chosen to sit. Another contract disappeared from his terminal. Caleb did not look at it. Alara reached for the circulation pump. The bearing is off-center. Of course it is. For the first time since she had crossed his threshold, Alara laughed. It was quiet and brief, almost lost beneath the rain. But she stayed. At 2:18 in the morning, Caleb realized the colony scanner had never actually seen a monster. It had seen someone freezing. Rain whispered against the windows while he sat at the kitchen table with historical scanner logs spread across his service display. Alara stood beside him, wrapped in the thermal blanket, her insulated cup warming her long blue fingers. Caleb had spent the previous hour comparing every threat reading recorded since she entered his house. Look at this. Alara leaned closer. Caleb opened the temperature history from his household environmental system, then aligned it with the scanner timestamps. 36 degrees Fahrenheit outside when she arrived. Threat index 91%. 95% when the door opened and cold air followed her inside. Then the heater started warming the room. 70 degrees. Threat index 63%. 74 degrees. 38%. That is not random, Caleb said. Alara studied the data. No, he pulled up the recording from Ben's delivery visit. The moment Ben raised his scanner, Alara had become tense. Her turquoise facial structures accelerated. The threat index climbed with them. Minutes after the door closed and she warmed again, both declined. Caleb looked at her. What exactly are those structures? Alara touched one glowing line beside her temple. Vascular heat exchangers. Meaning, my species evolved in a warmer climate. These structures redirect circulation around the brain and major sensory organs. They become more active when internal temperature begins falling. Caleb stared at the historical readings. So the faster they pulse, the harder my body is working to retain heat. How cold is dangerous? Extended exposure below approximately 45 degrees Fahrenheit becomes difficult. Below 40, particularly when wet, thermal regulation can become unreliable. Caleb looked toward the rain-dark window. 34 degrees outside now. The night Alara arrived had been 36. Soaked. Two shelters had looked at the most visible sign of thermal distress and interpreted it as a reason to leave her in the weather causing it. Why does the scanner call it predatory? Caleb asked. Alara moved closer to the display. Open its biological comparison library. He accessed the colony safety database and filtered for vascular facial responses. 3 registered predator species appeared. Each showed increased circulation around sensory structures immediately before rapid pursuit behavior. Caleb understood before Alara spoke. Same pattern. Superficially. Different meaning. Completely. Caleb leaned back. The machine had not invented the light. It had simply translated unfamiliar biology using the closest examples it already knew. Increased facial circulation meant preparation to hunt in one species. In Alara, it meant please make me warm. Caleb opened the original alert. Predatory response pattern. High probability. Threat index. 91%. He stared at it for several seconds. 91% monster, he murmured. Alara looked at him. What? Nothing. Caleb created a diagnostic report using only existing temperature records and timestamp scanner logs. No new experiment. No reason to make her cold again. The historical correlation was already clear. I can send this to environmental services. It will not prove everything about my species. It does not have to. Caleb attached the scanner comparison library. It only has to prove that confidence is not the same thing as understanding. Alara watched him transmit the report. Before either could say more, every light on the service terminal changed to amber. District thermal network instability. Caleb opened the colony map. Heating output was falling across 5 residential blocks. Then 6. Outside temperature, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. Alara set down her cup and studied the oscillating distribution curves. Her violet eyes narrowed. Caleb, what? She pointed toward 2 thermal loops correcting against each other in a repeating rhythm. Your colony has the same problem your heater had. Caleb looked at the falling temperatures, then at the alien woman Northpoint had left outside because its machines misunderstood her. Now those same machines were losing control of the cold. The district map turned amber faster than Caleb could read the warnings. Habitat 3 lost 12% of its thermal output. Habitat 4 followed. Then the transit shelter. Outside, rain struck the windows harder as the temperature dropped to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Caleb enlarged the distribution curves. Pumps were running. Valves responded. Pressure sensors agreed with one another. Nothing looked broken. That was the problem. Each loop thinks it is correcting an error, Alara said. She stood beside him, studying the waveforms. The Western controller increases pressure. The Eastern loop detects the change and compensates. Then the Western loop compensates for that correction. Caleb overlaid the two signals. A repeating oscillation appeared. They are fighting each other. Yes. His service terminal chimed. Priority maintenance personnel report to environmental control. Caleb grabbed his insulated work coat and tool case. Alara reached for her frontier coat. No, she looked at him. No. It is 32 degrees outside. You just explained why that is a terrible idea. Several thousand people are losing heat. Northpoint has technicians. Do they understand the resonance? Caleb glanced at the oscillating curves. Apparently not. Alara wrapped the thermal blanket beneath her coat and picked up the insulated cup. Then we should leave before the temperature drops further. Caleb stared at her for 1 second, then handed her his spare thermal scarf. You are extremely difficult to shelter. Your heater was easier. 12 minutes later, they entered Northpoint's Environmental Control Center through a service corridor. Amber emergency lights washed over rows of consoles. Technicians moved between thermal maps while habitat temperatures continued falling. A supervisor looked at Alara and immediately frowned. She is not authorized. Caleb connected his service tablet to the primary controller. She found the fault. The colony alert identifies her as a biological risk. Alara stepped toward the main display. Your eastern and western loops are phase-coupled. The supervisor looked at the waveforms. Every controller passed diagnostics. Individually, Caleb said. Alara overlaid the signals. The oscillation became obvious. She pointed toward the repeating offset. Automatic correction on each loop is creating the next correction. You need to interrupt one side long enough for the phase relationship to reset. The supervisor hesitated. How long? Alara studied the drifting waveform. Approximately 10 to 12 seconds. I need to watch the phase. Caleb placed his hand over the eastern loop's manual control. Ready. Alara's violet eyes followed the waveform. Now. Caleb disabled automatic correction. Warning indicators appeared immediately. Pressure shifted. 5 seconds. 8. 10. Not yet, Alara said. The turquoise structures along her temples were already pulsing faster in the cooler control room. The two waveforms moved toward alignment. Now. Caleb restored automatic control. For 1 long second, the curves separated. Then they settled into the same rhythm. Habitat 3 returned to green. Habitat 4 followed. The transit shelter. 1 block after another regained thermal output. Warm air began moving through thousands of homes. Nobody celebrated. The technicians simply watched the map change color. The supervisor looked at Alara, then at the turquoise lights flashing along her face. His expression shifted when he noticed what Caleb had already learned to see. You are cold. Alara pulled the scarf tighter. Yes. Caleb disconnected his tablet. Then we are done. The grid should be monitored, Alara said. There are enough technicians here to stare at green lights. The supervisor nodded slowly. He is right. Caleb handed Alara his insulated outer wrap. She looked at him. You will be cold. I am human. We complain professionally. A faint smile touched her face. They walked toward the exit while the thermal map remained green behind them. Northpoint had called Alara dangerous because its machines misunderstood what happened when she became cold. Yet when every human home in the district began losing warmth, the woman they had left outside was the one who walked back into the cold to help return it. Freezing rain followed them out of environmental control. It fell in bright diagonal lines beneath Northpoint's security lamps, turning the walkways into mirrors of blue and amber light. Caleb kept his pace slow. Alara wore the thermal blanket beneath her frontier coat, his scarf around her neck, and his insulated outer wrap over everything else. Even so, the turquoise structures along her temples were flashing rapidly. How cold are you? Caleb asked. Functional. That is becoming my least favorite answer. Then do not ask questions with inconvenient answers. Caleb looked at the nearest temperature display. 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Their house was still several blocks away. Across the walkway stood Northpoint Shelter 2. Alara saw it at the same moment. He did and stopped. No, Caleb looked at her. It is warm. That is the shelter that refused me. I know. Their scanner called me predatory. I remember that too. Alara's violet eyes remained fixed on the entrance. I would rather walk. Caleb looked at the turquoise lights pulsing beneath her cobalt skin. I would rather you did not. Before either moved, the shelter door opened. An older human man stood beneath the entrance light. Gray hair, heavy sweater, one hand holding the door. His eyes settled on Alara, then on the flashing structures along her temples. The scanner mounted beside the entrance activated automatically. Unknown biological activity. Caution advised. The man looked at the display. He reached over and muted it. Then he looked back at Alara. You look cold. She stared at him. Rain struck the metal awning above them. The scanner does not recognize my species, she said. Neither do I. The man stepped farther aside. Warm light spilled across the wet pavement. Still looks cold. Alara did not move. Caleb stayed behind her. He did not touch her shoulder. He did not tell her she was safe. That decision belonged to her. The older man continued holding the door. It is warmer inside. Slowly, Alara crossed the threshold. Warm air moved across her face. The turquoise structures continued flashing for several seconds, then began to slow. Caleb entered behind her. Families sat beneath restored thermal panels. A few people looked up. Some recognized Alara from the environmental control reports already moving through the colony network. Others only saw the unfamiliar woman standing near the entrance. Nobody asked her to leave. The shelter manager approached carrying a tablet. Caleb recognized the same classification warning from 2 nights earlier. Miss Venn, the manager said. Alara turned. Environmental Services received Mr. Morgan's report. Medical review confirms the observed vascular response is consistent with thermoregulation and shows no known hazard indicators. Alara glanced toward the muted scanner. I was also cold 2 nights ago. The manager lowered his eyes. Yes. There was no useful answer beyond that. He continued quietly. Your profile is being added to the emergency system. Until the review is complete, staff have been instructed not to classify unfamiliar vascular activity as threatening without additional evidence. Alara nodded once. That would have helped. Yes, he said again. A little girl sitting near the heating vent watched Alara with open curiosity. Do the blue lights keep you warm? She asked. Turquoise, Alara corrected gently. The girl smiled. Do the turquoise lights keep you warm? Alara touched one glowing line beside her temple. They try. The girl considered that. They are pretty. Alara became very still. Caleb saw the change in her face, small enough that nobody else would have noticed. The same lights adults had used as proof that something was wrong with her had become, to a child, simply something beautiful and unfamiliar. The older man returned to his chair, leaving the shelter door free to open for the next traveler. Caleb handed Alara her insulated cup from his tool bag. She wrapped both hands around it. Outside, the rain remained cold. Inside, nobody called her a hero. Nobody needed to. For the first time since arriving at Northpoint, Alara stood inside a public shelter while her strange lights flashed openly, and the only thing anyone finally understood was the simplest thing Caleb had seen from the beginning. She was cold. 4 months later, rain returned to Northpoint Colony with the same patient rhythm it had carried on the night Alara arrived. It tapped against Caleb's windows, ran through the metal gutters, and turned the street outside into long reflections of blue security lights. Inside, the heater ran quietly at 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Alara had redesigned the resonance mount after the district failure, and Caleb had finally stopped claiming his original repair was almost as good. Other things had changed too. Alara no longer slept 5 feet from the exterior door. The spare room had become hers without either of them formally deciding when that happened. Her environmental engineering manuals occupied a shelf beside Caleb's repair guides. Her frontier coat hung beside his insulated work jacket. The wide cup sat on the kitchen table next to Caleb's coffee mug, holding tea and no longer looking borrowed. Northpoint had changed more slowly. Caleb's canceled contracts returned one at a time. Some clients apologized. Others simply scheduled repairs again and avoided discussing why they had left. Shelter scanners now carried updated instructions for unfamiliar vascular responses, and Alara's species profile had been added to the emergency system. She never asked the colony to admire her. Being allowed to exist without proving she was harmless every morning seemed sufficient progress. That evening, Caleb sat at his workbench rebuilding a circulation controller while Alara reviewed thermal efficiency reports across the table. District 4 is wasting 3%, she said. Caleb did not look up. It is dinner. The thermal loss continues during dinner. Inconsiderate. Alara lifted her cup. The turquoise structures along her temples glowed slowly in the warmth. Then came 3 knocks. Soft, evenly spaced. Caleb's screwdriver stopped. Alara's cup stopped halfway to her mouth. 3 knocks had once meant rain, fear, and a woman standing on the wrong side of a door. The wall terminal activated automatically. An unfamiliar alien traveler stood beneath the awning, soaked through a dark travel coat. Their skin was pale gray, their face narrow, with delicate respiratory folds along the neck. A small case rested beside their feet. The scanner processed the image. Biological profile incomplete. Caution advised. Caleb began to stand. Alara was already moving. She crossed the room without glancing at the distance to the exit. No calculation. No hesitation. She reached the door and muted the warning. The exterior seal opened. Cold air entered with the smell of rain and wet metal. The travelers stepped backward. "I am sorry," they said. "The shelter scanner could not verify my respiratory requirements. I only need somewhere dry until morning." Alara looked at the water running from their coat. "Come inside." The traveler glanced toward the terminal. "Your system does not know what I am." "Neither do I." "Then what do you want from me?" Alara became still. Caleb watched from the workbench. For months earlier, she had asked almost the same question because she could not imagine kindness without a hidden transaction. Now she stepped aside. "Nothing." The traveler remained uncertain. Alara reached for a thermal blanket and placed it on a chair rather than forcing it into unfamiliar hands. "The door controls work from both sides," she said. "You may leave whenever you choose." Slowly, the traveler crossed the threshold. Caleb went to the kitchen and heated another bowl of soup. Alara closed the door, then looked toward the stranger. "You look cold." The traveler nodded. "I am." "Then get warm first." Outside, Northpoint remained wet, imperfect, and suspicious of things its machines could not identify. Inside, 3 cups waited on the table. Alara no longer measured safety in feet from the nearest exit. She had a room, a shelf, a coat hook, work worth doing, and a cup shaped for her hands. More importantly, she had learned what Caleb understood before the scanners, reports, and thermal graphs explained anything. Uncertainty was not a reason to leave someone in the rain. Months ago, Caleb had opened his door because Alara was cold. Tonight, when someone else knocked, she opened it for exactly the same reason.